No.
Was it carbon-based?
I don't know.
What did it want?
I don't think it wanted anything.
But it attacked you.
It mirrored me. I attacked it.
It came here for a reason. It was mutating our environment. It was destroying everything.
It wasn't destroying. It was changing everything. It was making something new.
I got sent the book by one of the producers, Scott Rudin, who suggested I read it because he thought I might be interested in adapting it. So I read it and had a kind of twin experience, which is that I really, really enjoyed reading it, and I was thinking this is fantastic and I do want to adapt it, but at the same time I was thinking I don't know how to adapt it. It's not like an obvious book to film movie where you have a kind of thriller with a thriller structure plot and you know what the beats are and where to structure them and that kind of thing.
But the structure of the story was the structure about the 5 people going into the national park to discover what the hell's going on to the world and to nature. So you had a sort of a linear journey, and that was always the journey, really, and finding out what is going on at the end.
You're going into the Shimmer?
6 days and counting.
You 3?
4. Ventress.
Dr. Ventress.
Broadly speaking, I think it has certain similarities to Ex Machina in terms of a science fiction, but a science fiction of today with real people in it, people that we recognise in a world that might be existing at this moment somewhere else.
What I thought was, I can't see a straight beat-by-beat adaptation, but the effect of reading the book had a very powerful effect on me. So what I'm going to do is, in a way, adapt my subjective experience of reading the book. I guess if it was a certain kind of thriller, you could do an objective adaptation where everyone would agree, yes, that's what happened at this moment, and that's what I felt at this moment. But I think this adaptation of Annihilation is much more personal or subjective than that.
It's funny because there's not a whole lot of dialogue in the novel, which I think is actually interesting because it gave Alex Garland a lot of space to kind of take scenes that are just summarized in a couple sentences and kind of flesh them out without kind of interference from me. But I did see it very cinematically. I'm a very visual writer. A lot of the beats in it are actually kind of taken as translations from movies I like. The way it kind of like starts as one thing and then becomes something else and then regroups and becomes a third kind of novel by the end is very cinematic in my mind.
The journey of the film, as we used to describe it between ourselves, was a journey from suburbia to psychedelia. We begin very much in the world we know, and we end in a world we don't know. And we get there like a frog sitting in increasingly boiling water, you know? And that is a description of a journey from an objective state to a subjective state. And what happens in a way to the people in this place is that they go mad. And that is, in some senses, falling deeper and deeper into your own subjective state and having it not corrected by the external objective world.
They've grown this way.
It doesn't make any sense. I think it does.
One thing about the books is I wanted them to be a series of novels with, you know, the normal kind of storylines, but I didn't want a single aspect of the natural world to be secondhand. So every detail in there is something that I've experienced in hiking and whatnot. And I've lived in North Florida now for over 20 years. The first novel, the setting is basically the 14-mile hike I do out at St. Mark's Wildlife Refuge. And I get most of my best ideas while I'm hiking. And I think a connection to the natural world is really important, especially now when so many of us have kind of lost that.
The process of creating the visuals, I think you'd have to say starts with a book, because the book puts images into the mind of whoever reads it, which obviously included me before I adapted it. So I'll have a few kind of thoughts, I suppose, and I'll relay them into the script. But then really what happens is there's a few people I then show the script to. Jock, who is an artist who I'd worked with on Ex Machina and Dread, and Michelle Day, who is part of the production design team, and Andrew Whitehurst, who's the VFX supervisor. And all of them are intensely visual minded, and they all present things in slightly different ways.
Every time I've worked with Alex, it's been very early in the process, and with Annihilation it was no different. He called with maybe an early draft of the script, and he said that he was working on it and he was interested in getting a few images together. And it's not, you know, the VFX guys at Double Negative do such a huge element of the designing and the actual concept. My stuff is more, it can be more tonal, more sort of imagery and ideas that are kind of finding the kind of, you know, the earliest kind of pointers in visually in the script.
Well, I started talking to Alex about this film when we were still finishing Ex Machina, so the gestation period has been a long time, and he sent me the first draft of the screenplay, and the thing that first jumped to mind was that the range of work in the film was going to be something that we certainly hadn't had to tackle on Ex Machina. And also, because it's the story of a journey, you need to be able to pitch and pace the objects that we add or change throughout the film so that you get the sense of the build-up of strangeness across the whole film. And that, to me, seemed like it was going to be a pretty big challenge for us.
When he first called, he said, you know, I'd just like about 5 or 6 images which kind of give a sort of overview of what this thing might look like. And again, I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, that sounds like, doesn't sound too hard. Then you start, and it's a wormhole. The possibilities, and again, and what the material demands really is very challenging. You know, that you need to walk the walk to get to the point that you need to get to make this thing feel and seem real. You know, even though it's very otherworldly.
The tone and texture, all of that stuff is fascinating because it's exactly what I would have envisioned, you know, in researching the novel.
We were looking at a lot of cell imagery, we were looking at a lot of tumour growths on creatures and on plants to see how the radiation sickness, see how those can add mutations to creatures and to plants.
And part of our notion was that how do things get destroyed at a microbiological level, at a level of DNA, and that is by nucleated substances. Where has that happened in the world, or how's that happened in our lifetime? Fukushima and Chernobyl, when we started to look around at the effects, and most references are about the damaged buildings, but we found these plants that I think are called fascinated, and they have grown with the influence of damaged DNA.
And you can even just like stick a cancer cell to a tree, for example, and suddenly it looks otherworldly and odd. And you know, those very simple things can sometimes just at least, you know, be the springboard to push you in different directions.
Then what happens is I collate the images that everyone has been putting together, and I put them together into a PDF, and that then gets disseminated to everybody, and it becomes the tonal look of the film. Well, apart obviously of thinking about Jeff's book, which is, you'd have to say, the single biggest influence, the real influences, not the post-rationalized or even pre-rationalized influences, are sort of unknown to me, I think. But if I was going to hazard a guess, I'd probably say Alan Moore, British comic book writer. I suspect there's some Alan Moore in there.
He's mentioned in the past how the Alan Moore comics were a big influence on him, and Alan is a very intellectual writer in the same way I think that Alex is.
Swamp Thing. So this will make sense to people who were fans of comic books in the 1980s, which is a niche crowd. But to those people, Alan Moore's Swamp Thing appears about 2/3 of the way through the film in these sort of frozen statue figures. So there you go, there's one.
Rolling and action.
What happened, as you say, this film's slightly hard to pin down, and that doesn't necessarily make it easy to finance at a major film studio. But you had two things happening. You had three things maybe. A script that was terrific, and then you had the writer-director's other film, in this case Ex Machina, suddenly becoming sort of the talk of America through the summer and becoming a genuine sleeper hit. And then at the same time, Natalie Portman was attached to the film, and suddenly you've got something that goes from a possibility to a probability, should we say.
And it became more of a film than a novel. And Alex convinced everybody, including Paramount, that this was going to be a movie worth doing.
This used to be the headquarters of the Southern Reach, before the Shimmer swallowed it.
Seems like a good place to spend the night.
Yeah.
More mutations.
They're everywhere. I saw some on the boat, right?
Malignant. Like tumors.
Romantic, isn't it?
In the putting together of this ensemble, these 5 people moving through this strange landscape, one of the things we had to be sure of was that you don't somehow consciously or unconsciously end up sort of with 5 people who are the same. Specifically, they needed to have different energies. All of them actually, they bring in a very, very particular energy which is idiosyncratic to them.
I'm from Johns Hopkins, biologist.
Oh, there you go.
Ha, biologist?
Told you she was smart.
What?
Because the characters didn't have names in the book, they didn't have genders to begin with, but I had the sense of them as being women, and you kind of sleep on that idea, and then you see if you actually have characters that evolve. And so the very next day, the second day I was writing it, I had been trying to assign names, which was failing. It just wasn't working for me to envision them, their characters. And then also trying to see whether they were men or women. And every time I tried to use a male name, it wasn't working. And then the second day, I had the backstories for all of them, and they were all women. And then the conscious part of that is that so many times you see in movies and in books where you have all men on some kind of expedition like this, and you have one token woman. And so I did consciously think about that too, about the gender roles.
All women.
Scientists.
The previous teams have been largely military, so.
It's incredible to get to be with 5 women on a film and completely rare, unfortunately. And it's great. It's such a different environment when you're not the only one. That's the usual thing, is you're the girl in the movie, you know? And it's nice not to feel like that. It's nice to feel that you're a character reacting to other characters, not that you're a representative for your entire gender in a film.
The first person cast in the film was Lena, Natalie Portman, and I think it was a conversation like you always have, and it was a list of 1. She was very keen on the script and was keen to meet Alex, and they met a couple of times, and she agreed to do it. It was very as you dream it would be.
I met Alex Garland about this film, it was like 1.5 years ago, I think, and he was telling me about the story, and then I got to read the script, and it just seemed so wild to me to get to make this sort of science fiction action film, but just that had a real psychological basis, you know, about all of our sort of self-destructive tendencies.
Oh, that's nice of you. Why aren't you here?
I think she's so incredible. She's such an incredible actor and very giving and just so warm. I've had a great time with her, and I'm bummed that there's not more, you know, because I would leave those scenes and I would just feel just some real work was being done. She's really fantastic.
She created a character that had an enormous amount of control in themselves, in their behavior, in their actions. But at the same time, in very subtle ways, would convey huge internal damage and brokenness. And it was the coexistence of that control and order and structure, and between the gaps, the brokenness, that at times could suddenly flare out and then recede. And Natalie was just supernaturally gifted at constructing that character.
And Natalie can sort of do anything, and it's one of the few, I think that our editor has said, it's one of the few times that there's not a take with Natalie Portman in that he couldn't use on anything she does. Literally, when it's a subtle thing, but the minute she's in front of the camera, she just inhabits Lena, and it's fantastic.
For those that follow, I believe that means us.
Well, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to do Ventress, and there were lots of different discussions. But again, I think the casting people said, you know, if you want the best American actress, get Jennifer. And she brings something, you know, original to the part.
It's just a really great group of women. I mean, he cast it really well. Not only that are the women incredibly, you know, talented and committed and there and excited to be a part of it, but also just really such a lovely group to be a part of and hang out with and chat with, which is good because the scenes can be, you know, it's tough. I mean, just basically being in sort of, I mean, we're in London, I mean, we're in Britain, by the way, we're sort of shooting in forests and sometimes into mud up to our knees and slogging with with machine guns and backpacks, and it can be. And we're doing what they call standing lunch, which means we don't actually break. You know, it's like, oh, you have 10 minutes, you should eat now, kind of thing. So, eating very quickly. But it really was a fun experience. You must feel as if you're in a dream.
Am I?
The performances are not prescribed by me; they're really defined by the actors. So I wasn't. In some ways, it was hardest to anticipate what Jennifer would turn up with, because she's done so much in so many different kinds of ways, and she herself, just as an individual, as a human, is really an original. I think I've never met anyone like her, and what it felt like was the most perfect fit for the film. I felt like on some deep level she tonally got the film and sort of channeled it and manifested it. That's the way it felt to me.
Okay, ladies, this is getting a little heavy.
It's interesting because it wasn't the obvious choice, I think, from reading it. So it gave me an opportunity to delve into something different. Definitely very different from what I play usually on screen right now. So not a virgin anymore.
I think the thing about Gina, I'd seen her do stuff and then met her. And one of the things I noticed immediately was that the character on screen was not her. And the character on screen that I'd seen was very kind of holistic, quite a complete character, very complete character, and still was not her. And that tells you a lot about an actor. It tells you that what you're seeing is genuinely a performance. They're not just, some actors are in a way, what they really are is very, very unself-conscious and able to be themselves in front of a camera and not have their sort of psychological structure and behaviors suddenly dismantled out of self-awareness. Gina was really creating a complete character, and I found that very, very striking and really kind of interesting.
Damn.
The hard bit is getting all these actors because they're so busy, there's so much work going on. So we had this moment, I remember, with Tessa when she was doing Westworld. It was all, you know, when are they ever going to finish? They were rewriting, they were doing this. It's getting them here, and then she has the opportunity to be in Thor, a new character. I'm not a Marvel expert, but it was a really big deal. So then she had to leave here, you know, make sure she could leave here. So it's getting everybody into the slot.
I thought the radio waves were blocked by the shimmer, and that's why no one inside could communicate with base or GPS. But look up. See the clouds? And the sky? The light waves aren't blocked, they're refracted. After I saw Ex Machina, I was like, God, I want to make a science fiction film. I want to make something that is steeped in the imagination, that defies our ideas about reality, and I want to play in that space. So in that way, it started with Ex Machina, but I didn't know that it would happen so soon after I got sent the script and read it and had the chance to meet Alex and talk with him about what Ex Machina meant to him and also what Annihilation could mean to an audience, and then I wanted to do it so badly. It's the same with the radios. The signals aren't gone, they're scrambled.
I think she's literally brave. The first time we met each other, she asked me some very fair but very confrontational questions about the film I'd just worked on, which notionally, within the context of meeting a director about a gig, is not sort of what actors would normally do. I thought it was a fantastic thing to do, and I thought the questions were brilliant, and the way she put the questions were brilliant. And that kind of intellectual courage also felt to me like a perfect mesh with that character, who in their way is sort of the most courageous in the way they deal with what they encounter, by continuing to think the implications through and then actually follow through on those implications.
Volunteering for this, it's not exactly something you do if your life is in perfect harmony.
Alex was not mentioning action or thriller or sci-fi. He was mentioning psychology, he was mentioning biology. And that's what fascinated me, that then reading the script, that, you know, a story that in a way simple and linear could be so faceted with and so nuanced with so many layers of different sciences and psychology. And I think it's a beautiful mix of all those aspects adding up to an exploration of one's inner self in terms of annihilation, you know.
Tuva is just a hyper truthful actor. I just believe in what she does. And when sometimes she would break off or say, I don't like that take or whatever, it was because she didn't believe in the honesty of her performance at that moment. She's immensely gifted in that respect.
Tuva was the last person we cast. After we cast Natalie, we cast Oscar, Isaac Kane. That was tricky because we wanted Oscar Isaac, but he was doing this other little movie called Star Wars, and it didn't look like the dates would ever work. And one of the great things about shooting here at Pinewood has allowed us to have Oscar.
If for no other reason then, as you know, being sat here in Pinewood, is that the only other film being shot in Pinewood at the moment is Star Wars.
Which I have to say Star Wars were incredibly helpful about. Ryan and Ram, the director, producer, respectively, just the production, it could not have been more helpful, and really, because we're a small film and they didn't have to help us out, and they did.
So literally sometimes just walking back and forth, and at first I thought I wasn't gonna be able to handle it, just being too tired, and how was I gonna give the right kind of energy to this thing, but I really wanted to work with Alex. I want to do every movie that he makes. So luckily between the people at Star Wars and the people on Annihilation, they were able to work out the schedule so I could get it done. But I found that instead of it tiring me, it was completely invigorating because it was so different. There was a freedom and almost a kind of performance art aspect to it that I didn't realize I was thirsting for.
Oscar, you know, is the proper chameleon, and when he's on our set, he's just incredibly committed. He enjoys strolling on sometimes in full Star Wars uniform, really annoying them, and just hanging out with us. But he's terrific, and the fact it worked was amazing.
he does something which, from my point of view, is incredible to watch. He'll just be talking as Oscar, and he'll say, well, yeah, it's interesting because you could do the film like this, and then he'll do a reading of the line, and it will be a very complete, total performance, nuanced and whole. And then he'll say, or the other way, back as Oscar, you could do it like this, and then another totally different reading with a whole other set of really delicately dropped in colours and nuances and stuff like that. And it's pretty extraordinary. So if you want to know how he can move from a Star Wars set, walk a couple of sound stages over, and then do some nuanced stuff on Annihilation, however he does it, it's just something he can do. He can do that sitting in the kitchen of his apartment and just switch it on, switch it off. There's no like, I need to walk around for 6 months in character, none of it. It's just there. It's somehow available to him. It is extraordinary, actually.
What's very interesting about Alex and about the way that he creates these films is that he is not only interested in making an interesting science fiction film with a lot of the elements that are familiar that we love about those kind of movies, but also exploring things about human nature and relationships that are quite painful, and using the backdrop of this kind of science fiction idea to explore those themes, I think is a really smart way of finding a way of looking at these things in an unexpected way.
I think if you can shoot in sequence, it helps everybody. You keep a different kind of track of the story and where characters are within the story and where you are within the story and where your colleagues are within the story. I sometimes think that the biggest issues on film sets often reduce to communication, and on the films I work on, there is a very open level of communication. There's a lot of talk between all the departments, and hierarchy structures are very deliberately broken down, and it's a collective. And that could make things rather kind of messy, potentially, and complicated and unfocused. But one of the ways you can mitigate that is if you shoot in sequence, everybody kind of understands where they are.
And our story allowed us to do that. Often you're chopping and changing backwards and forwards between time and place, but we go in pretty much, a straight line of time. And it has so many advantages in the production of the film, in the design process, but I think in the drama, for the actors, for the people making it, it's so much easier to progress, one step at a time. And if we all start to believe, this is our general mantra for us in design as well, if we believe what's on screen and we believe that, then that translates straight to the actors, and that will translate to the audience, hopefully. So I think many crews would love to do it in order, but it's not always possible.
We thought a little bit, very, very briefly, about shooting in Louisiana for the landscape, but it turned out there were many very, very solid reasons why it made sense to shoot in the UK.
54 Alpha, take 4. Thank you, Jeff.
So we are standing at entering the swamp in America, although we're actually in Windsor in England, don't tell anyone. So Windsor Great Park is part of the Crown Estate. Windsor Castle is only a couple of miles down the road. That's where the Queen lives, so effectively we're in her back garden. So when you think of Florida swamps, you don't necessarily think of the English Queen and her estate, but as it happened, when the guys first visited and looked at the pond as it was then, Alex said you can carry on scouting, you can look at other places if you wish, but this is where we'll shoot, it's perfect. We've dressed it with the little stumps, as you see, and the Spanish hanging moss, and created an immaculate illusion of a swamp in Florida.
So we've made 20-foot bald cypresses which have a cone base. The things we noticed there were for that sort of area were cone-based trees and what we call knuckles and knees, it's a root system that grows out of the swamp areas to get, I guess, oxygen. So we replicated about 100 of those out of polystyrene, painted them, and we found this sort of knee-deep area and we popped them in with our trees. And hopefully, I mean, we feel it looks pretty spot on to that area. Right next to it, we have a pond area, which allowed us to put in the next beat of their trip where they see a fishing hut.
Michelle Day, who is part of the production design team, turned up with an image that she'd taken on a recce to Louisiana, a photograph of a hut that had half sunk into the swamp. Immediately it speaks of something different, something broken. And so we built the whole scene around the photo that Mish took. Because if the hut is sunk at that angle, then the water's going to be at that angle. And if the water's at that angle, then whatever's in the water can be hidden in that space. And we've been outside in this big forest with these beautiful, strange prismatic light effects and mutant flowers clustered around this thing. But now we can be in a dark and claustrophobic space. And so it all just keeps building outwards.
I think recreating these things for real was hard, but the way every set has been pushed to be this slightly surreal or other type of thing as well, this shimmer and nature being different and crazy and mutated and spliced has been incredible. I mean, I loved working in the fishing hut set because they'd done all sorts of things that made you feel that you were properly in the southern states of America, and we have obviously American actresses and we have American people visiting, and they could not believe, no one could believe we were 5 miles from Trafalgar Square, or maybe in our terms 1 mile from the M25. And so I think that was an amazing feat.
So we had to dig out a section 5 metres square that we had to put this water tank in that created the base of the water hut, so that they had clean, safe water inside the hut while they were filming, and give them the depth of water that was required also to do what they needed to do in the hut itself.
Anything interesting in there? No, it's been long abandoned, maybe even before. You know what's funny is when I got the part, Alex made a stop in New York to talk to me, especially about the alligator attack, because I think he was a little afraid that I maybe, that any actress might not be up for the challenge. And of course we have an incredible stunt team. But, so much of the suspense of that exists on your face, really. So it was a bonus that I was up for the challenge. But he came to New York basically to explain to me what a tough day it was going to be. And I thought, are you making sure that I'm going to be okay so that you really decide, can I make the movie? I'm going to be fine, I promise you.
Tessa was absolutely brilliant, absolutely brilliant. A really, really uncomfortable scene.
Get her, come on.
And again, she didn't complain all day. I didn't hear a peep out of her. She was absolutely brilliant. We rehearsed that, so we built a tank for her to rehearse in, so that, but it was warm water and it was clean, but she got the idea of, and we rehearsed the action with her, all the drags under, the breath holding, being ragdolled around by the alligator. Then when we came to the day, the water was much colder, it was murky, it was dark, and she was in it all day. And again, phenomenal stamina and phenomenal performance, and just so, wanted to do it all and to get it all right.
She's an itty bitty person, but with a lot of water and a big old backpack, it was pretty heavy, which was very cool, and that was really cool to see. And she was a super champ because it was not easy, and it was cold outside, and it's wet, and from inside the hut to out of the hut to in between takes to setting up different takes, it's extremely demanding, and to see her do it without complaining is pretty awesome.
You're good, you're good. Okay.
Alex has a very close relationship with Andrew, our visual effects supervisor, so he's very confident in visual effects, but he also appreciates the need for physical effects when it interacts with our actors, when it interacts, say, like here, we're interacting with water a lot, with the alligator, and it's very important for visual effects to have something to work with, to have the actual physical interaction with the water movement, the way the water hits the ground, the way the water hits the actresses.
So we made various elements to help achieve that. One of them being a full-size, realistic-looking alligator. Another one was like a hero head of the same alligator, so they could physically open the jaw and have a look inside and examine it, and it's all kind of got the same weight, and the teeth are kind of sharp and as realistic as we could make it, essentially. And there was a couple more elements for VFX reference. We had sort of a man in a suit sort of version, and then a sort of foam sort of stand-in version. And we also provided some other sort of like silicone versions for interaction with the water, so the alligator has to sort of come out of the doorway and slip into the lake, and they needed obviously the displacement of the water.
What that gave us was a good natural splash from something that was the appropriate size. It also gave us a lot of things that again would be very difficult to add after the fact, like the ripples that then go away, and then if you look in the background of the shot, when the ripples hit the edge of the pond, you start seeing the grass moving over there. All of that we got in camera. Then we paint out the buck and we replace it with the CG gator.
Okay.
There's something in the water, something big.
We set up for the first shot, which wasn't to do with the alligator launching out of the water, but then Alex quietly asked me, you know, are you ready to go? Could you do it for this take, but keep it quiet because the actresses don't know. And so we sort of did all our final checks, got all our tests ready and rolled the cameras, and everyone other than us thought it was just the first rehearsal, just the first part of the scene. But then obviously we launched the alligator out as they got to their marks. And they all jumped back, scared, and then fell about laughing. So it was quite fun.
We all really just jumped, you know, almost comedically, I think, in some ways, because it was an actual surprise.
And between the world of practical effects and visual effects, really just Tristan and Andrew. And then, by the way, the special effects, you know, Hayley and the explosions and all of them, then Joe and the stunts, like all of them, all they're really doing is just working with each other and saying to each other, in order for you to later do your bit best, what do you need me to do? And vice versa. And it's so simple, that. Gator.
What I loved about, you know, the script and this movie, it's the action it's not action for the sake of action. It's the story, you know, and that if you've got that, then you believe what's going on, you know, as opposed to, oh, here come the stunts, you know.
We've always tried to do as much in camera as possible so that it feels real, and so there's interaction between an object and a person the whole time, or an environment and a person. So you might add, and you might with visual effects, and you might, you know, if you look up, it might be extended. But there's very little green screen in this film, almost none.
It's just, I'm just wetting up the mud just to bring it back to its original dark colour for this wide shot.
The creature work's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And some of the key VFX shots are effectively just beautifully precise mappings of what Tristan's practical effects did, and some of them also are just straightforwardly practical effects.
So we had a scene where Kane was cutting open someone's stomach, and the idea was to shoot it as live as possible, and have the knife kind of go around the prosthetic chest that we built that kind of extended out in front of the actor.
They had created this whole prosthetic torso that could be cut open, that had layers underneath, and it's this weird thing to show whatever is in Area X is inside, and he's changing, and his intestines are moving like snakes, and again, quite surreal imagery.
So we had that basically all live, rigged up on set, with the sort of worm intestines going kind of through the set behind him when we were operating them.
Reverse it, guys, that's it. That's the word. Just like that, that's the word. That's the word. That's good, that's good.
So we shot, the whole scene with sort of like a blood knife cutting open the fake skin and revealing the sort of moving intestines. I think it was quite exciting. It was nice to see.
Yeah, and to do that scene was just a lot of fun to do, and again, it felt wild, quite wild. I really love Alex's approach.
I dare say this, but it's all gone very smoothly so far. That's really the problem with, creatures or prosthetic things that aren't. But if you don't have anything, if you don't have at least a stuntman in a sort of dressed in green, it's all about reality. You have to believe what you're seeing. You know as the audience whether it's correct or not.
No! Shepard! Shepard!
The bear was one of the very early things that we knew had to be solved. We looked at, it wasn't a good day at the office, but looking at diseased animals, the way that the skin can be sort of malnourished and blistered, and those were the kind of things that Alex responded to, because it just gave it a sick look. The creature looked sick.
The bear was one of the first things that we started doing concept art for. We had some very strange ideas. We sometimes, we had versions where it was sort of more like a wild boar rather than being a bear. And then one of the concept artists, Peter, came up with the idea of sort of smooshing skulls together, and he just, in sort of CG, just literally kind of mashed some skulls together and then just started painting on top of that. And that immediately, when I saw it, went, yes, that's a great idea. And showed that to Alex, and he went, yeah, I really like that. And then it was a question of, okay, what then do we want to do to the rest of this bear?
So not only was it sort of more, this bear was sort of emaciated and skinny and losing its hair, but it started to have elements of other things that are in this world, maybe other people that have been attacked by it or eaten by it or such. So I think having those kind of elements coming through, it also has sort of human teeth on the inside of its bare teeth. So all these little other mutations that are sort of gradually fusing into things we meet along the way.
In the case of the bear attack, I think what we tried to do was, all right, so here's a sci-fi movie, sort of, and here's a monster, sort of, within a sci-fi movie attacking the heroes, And so we're in familiar territory, that happens a lot. And the question was what to do with the monster, how to make the monster, how to make you feel something different about the monster. And without getting too much into it, because it's sort of, I guess it would break up some of the things we were trying to do within the story. The monster relates very directly to the husband of the lead of the protagonist, and the context of the house relates to the house in which that married couple live. And the behavior of the monster has something odd about it, because it's primarily in a state of sort of despair and pain rather than anger. And so it's a kind of existential monster in an existential space, and everything in it and everything about it is echoing something else. There are echoed forms embedded into it. There's echoed noises embedded into its throat. Its actual form is an echo of something else, a tattoo, and the context of it is an echo of another geographical space. And then we just tried to make it scary.
The bear was really scary, actually. Those days we spent, I think, a week or more with the bear, and yeah, it was, I mean, it really, the animatronic beast that they made is remarkable.
It's been really lucky to have these practical creatures to work off of with the bear and the alligator, because even though I think they're going to be largely computer generated later, it was really so helpful to have that to react to. It really changes everything. It's, one less thing you have to do as an actor if you don't, have to imagine something. And we're all reacting to the same thing, too. It means that we all have the same picture in our head. And they're terrifying and they're very realistic. I mean, when the bear comes up and starts nuzzling us, you really are so terrified. You don't have to act that much.
Yeah, the bear is, we have, different variations. We have the animatronic version. We just have like the rubber head version. Then we have Jack, who is our stuntman and our sort of animal performer.
So they hired me because of the height. That's the one thing, because they wanted to have a bear and alligator big, like size-wise, so it helps visual effect and special effect guys with the size and the movements. How much space do you take in a certain scene with the action as well.
3, 2, 1, action.
So how it works with the action, so my stunt coordinator or boss, John McLaren, she will set up the whole action and we go through rehearsals. So in this particular movie we rig a lot of cables and chairs, and we have to time it perfectly with the animal going either through people, through chairs, through objects.
So what we did for the stunt elements is we put Jack in just like a black suit so that he could do the Gina elements. And then he would come in to be the bulk. He'd put the other suit on and come and be the bulk, which helps with the lighting references and just kind of, even things where we place the chairs, because we have to leave space for visual effects then to put in the bulk of the bear.
With the bear, we use stilts. So it'll be my legs, I'll be holding to the stilts, and you have to walk like a bear as well, so make sure it's not mechanical movement, it's like really moving your shoulders. So really, you have to study the bear movements and practice that, so it looks realistic. And size-wise, the bear is slightly is taller and bigger. So they asked me a few times to stand up and just bring my hands up, and I saw it on the video afterwards. Size-wise, it looks really, really good.
1, 2, 3, 4. Hello, my name's Guy Stevens, and I was part of the team that put the animatronic bear together. We've nicknamed him Dexter, just because, and he's silicone skin with mechanical bits inside his head to make the mouth move and the jaw, the lips move and the eyes move. And then back here, he's mounted on a 3-rodded swash plate, which my colleague here is wiggling around, and that gives the bear animation, so it moves up and down and left and right. It can also twist its neck and its head. And we have a hand control here that'll do the jaw for the biting sequences. And we also have some mechanical bits here. So there's a snarl here, makes it look aggressive. And we've got a cheek that's pulling back round there, and there's some ears that wiggle backwards and forwards. And I think if I wiggle that one, the eye moves. So it's quite a simple animatronic. It's a glorified lighting stand-in, really, because it'll actually end up being a CG character. But this is quite good to help build the scene and give the actor something to act against. And we can cover it in slime and blood. Yes, hello.
It's all about real reference, so that when you put something in its place, it feels like it belongs in its place rather than it's come from a computer. And that's the final skill, obviously, of Andrew Whitehurst and his team at Double Negative.
The question is there another pass we need to do with just this? Because Jack is very limited, because sometimes it just points directly upwards. And some of the interactions the animatronic can't quite get to. So, for example, when it's looking down about to take a big bite and it's rearing up, how do we do that? We can put the animatronic head on another rig and puppeteer that, so you've still got the jaw movement. That would be great, and then it's just a question of time. It's like how quick it is to do these things.
How long was it till it's bottom tap?
20 minutes.
Okay. So what we're going to do is learn a lot on this first one. So let's just crack on and get into it.
So at one point, the leaner is saying to the other two, just you've got to keep as still as you can. And what you've got is this bear head that Alex is manipulating, sort of there with them, and it's really not nice. And so the reactions, again, it's about, and you can do any kind of visual effects, but you can't visual effect acting. And so the key in this whole thing is that it's all about the contact that the audience has with the people. And so what you want is to manage to manipulate this in a way that you get the maximum effect of these great actors that we've got in front of the camera.
Cut that.
And the last 5 days shooting, all we were doing is shooting a bear. It's like there's very little dialogue. We spent 5 days on a very big action sequence with stunts.
Gina is amazing. Not only did she want to do all of her own stunts, but she did do all of her own stunts. You know, some people say she really did. I mean, she is, not only is she beautiful and feminine, but she is strong. She's a really, tough cookie.
So I'm a bit like an adrenaline junkie. I love to do my own stunts. I'm a big, big fan of that, which sometimes they're not always the biggest fan because they obviously want to protect us and make sure that we're okay. Luckily for me, I die at the way end of this movie, so I'm able to do my stunts because should something happen, I'm done anyway. But I have really cool stunts that I get to do, and so far I've banged up myself pretty bad, but happily, and that was my choice, to live in this awesome world that he's created and to get the opportunity to do stuff outside of my comfort zone.
She did proper big stunts. She got picked up and slammed hard by a guy the size of a bear into a wall and then thrown from the wall really hard down to the ground. And they weren't messing about, they actually did it.
When she's getting chucked around, she's actually getting chucked around. I mean, they were not holding back at all, which makes our lives so much easier, because when we're adding this sort of huge creature, you're not feeling that we have to animate it so it looks like it's mollycoddling her a bit. I mean, we can animate it so it's really slinging her around, because Jack was really chucking her around. So again, that practical, on-set, tangible impact helps us, and it helps the finished film so much.
Actually, don't pull me that hard yet. No, pull me hard eventually, but let me hang on a little bit so that I can do a little bit of it.
So I did have to, play a mum a little bit and go, right, because I don't need my pads on. I'm like, yeah, you're going to put your pads on, and keep an eye on her, because, when the adrenaline's going, and she also has the emotion of the character and all of that to deal with, all the acting side to deal with. Sometimes at the end of the day you can think, oh, actually I really am really sore and stuff. So that's part of my job, is making sure that, she can do that all the acting and the emotional without having to worry about the physical side. So I was, making sure you've got your pads on, and like, yeah.
And then the next morning came in and everyone was asking her how sore she must be. And she said no, she didn't feel anything at all. And it was, she had to pretend that she had some ache somewhere to make the rest of us feel sort of slightly less inadequate.
We cut that.
Gina,
Check. Everyone all right? That's perfect. All good.
The VFX guys, took the Shimmer to a whole another level. When I was working on it, the things that inspired it were even things like Northern Lights. The way light refracts through atmospheres in interesting and different ways. There are a couple of images where Yeah, I remember hitting on the idea of where the light would cut through trees or something like that and cut through the atmosphere, but you'd see the rainbow of colours, which seemed to work, you know, and Alex liked that a lot. You know, the way that light dances through atmosphere. And again, you know, the VFX guys took that to a whole nother level.
We had two particular challenges where the weight of responsibility fell hardest on the shoulders of the VFX team. One was the look of the shimmer itself, and the other was the look of the thing that was causing the shimmer. So the shimmer is effectively a radiating effect from one particular thing. And both of those things needed to be defined, and both of them were things that existed almost entirely in the world of visual effects.
We talked a lot about different ways of representing it, whether it should be something that was gaseous, whether it should be something that was affected by somebody who walked through it. So if you prodded it, would it be like the surface of water and ripple, or should it be something that almost exists on a different plane and therefore it has no interaction with the objects around it? And that was, we sort of slightly hedged our bets between those two ideas.
The shimmer is a prism, but it refracts everything.
Basically, we looked at refraction. So we looked at the way light will pass through water particles in, say, the vapor trail of a plane, and you can get some weird rainbow effects happening within the vapor trail and use that to create the rainbow effects within the shimmer. And it would be that kind of thing, sort of prismatic effects.
The subliminal effect of the interior shimmer was something that we worked hard at and had to try several iterations until we got the level right, because it's interesting how strong you can make something visually and people, unless they're actually guided to notice it, won't notice it. And we needed to set up that there is this effect, which we did with a sort of huge wall of shimmer on the outside of it. So you've kind of hit the audience over their head with the idea that there is this thing, and they're therefore a bit clued in to be looking for strangeness again once the characters are within it. And then after that we could sort of back away from it a little bit, so it's there throughout the film and it's there if you notice it, but I think for most people it's going to be something that's continually sort of prodding them subconsciously throughout it. I mean, even there's a scene in a guard tower where there's cracks in the panes in the glass, and we added sort of refractive shimmer effect into some of those cracks in the panes in the glass. Now, I'm willing to bet 95% of the audience will never notice it consciously, but it's just always there as a little cue just to, you know, gently remind the subconscious mind. And then the physical structure of the shimmer on the outside, once we'd started designing the alien itself, and we used a 3D fractal form called a Mandelbulb as our basis for this alien creature, and that creates these interesting, almost gothic structures just by the nature of the way that the equations work. Those are the shapes that it produces. We were able to use those and warp those and unwrap those to create this sort of wall around the most outer extent of the shimmer. When you first see the shimmer, that's what you're looking at, is this mathematical structure that is then echoed at other points throughout the film, but is finally resolved in the alien that's encountered at the chamber at the end.
It's inside me now.
What's inside you?
Right from the beginning, our conversations were hugely centered around the form of the alien and the nature of the alien, and the way the form is informed by the nature of the alien. We wanted something that sort of made sense when you saw it, but at the same time didn't make sense. And there's some shapes in mathematics that are very interesting like that. So we looked and looked, and eventually we found an app. And the app constructed a three-dimensional version of a 2D mathematical conceit, which is a shape, the Mandelbrot set, which is a fractal shape, and the 3D version of it is a Mandelbulb. And when you move that around, it moves in a way that feels organic, but is also mathematical and is hard or impossible really to predict in terms of its movements, and yet sort of makes sense whilst not making sense. So that was everything we wanted.
And Our object, our creature, is not perfectly a Mandelbulb. We took a Mandelbulb and then we did some things to it because, again, it had a narrative function that it needed to serve, so it needed to have a sort of aperture in the front of it, which Mandelbulbs naturally don't. We tried to make it slightly ambiguous as to whether it was smoky or solid, and we added light sources within it. So art department were able to build a sort of fiberglass glowing Mandelbulb that sat on a stick in the middle of the room. So again, for framing up shots, we had something there.
So we constructed the thing from a Mandelbulb outwards, basically.
The hardest parts were how we got from the Mandelbulb into the humanoid. We knew we wanted to play a little bit with what the audience thought that they were looking at scale-wise, where we would travel into the Mandelbulb and then we would find the humanoid in some form within the Mandelbulb, and then the Mandelbulb would open out into the room. So what you thought was a humanoid creature that's, sort of about the size of an action man actually is human size, and you're then not sure about the scale of anything that you're looking at.
The final sequence I think is going to be really beautiful looking. I mean, Alex has such an amazing eye, like artistic eye, and I think it's going to be really unique to have the whole movie sort of be outside in nature, and all of a sudden it really becomes very black and white almost in the interior of the lighthouse. And the forms are they look like biological forms, like plant or animal or something, but also very alien. So I think it'll be quite beautiful.
And actually the chamber itself, I worked with art department to make that so that is also a Mandelbulb. So I would sit down with Marco and Mish and Dennis and go, well, how complicated do you want it? And they, I'd sort of render something and go too complicated, and I'd go make it a bit simple. It's like, yeah, kind of like that. And then I would be able to give them that geometry, and then they were able to get the thing CNC machined. So the whole environment that scene takes place in is a Mandelbulb. So you've got a Mandelbulb within a Mandelbulb.
The chamber set and the lighthouse set, people who've poked their heads in so far are quite amazed by that. It's the culmination of the journey, I think, in terms of the drama, of the change. It's where it's all started from, and we're backtracking to that. I think there's great scale and detail of out of control growth and mutant change.
When you're moving, stay in character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Try to remember roughly what Jennifer did. You could watch it. Yeah.
I am Sonoya Mizuno, and I am playing the humanoid. I also have a small part as Katie, one of Lena's students at the beginning of the film. So I met Alex on Ex Machina, and he had this idea for what would usually be a typical action scene to make it something a bit more interesting and different and pushing the boundaries. And because I have a background in dance, we spoke a lot about it and how we could make a scene which was like a dance but not actually a dance, and that's how this whole kind of idea evolved.
Bobby, who was the choreographer for the end sequence, and Sonoya, who plays the humanoid, we did a whole fight choreography that was coming from almost a dance to have sort of a different flavor than a usual fight.
When the humanoid is going to be fully formed, it will be a kind of featureless, quite androgynous shaped person. So this is all going to become that in VFX, who eventually sets on fire. So then that's why I get changed into a very cool and expensive LED suit later.
It's been really great to get to work with Sonoya. She's obviously a professional ballet dancer, so she has this real ability to a really great gift for movement, and so I really give her any credit for the symmetry of it, because I feel like I'm sort of doing what I would do and then she's kind of mirroring it.
The basic idea was to have an alien that was truly alien, that was not like us in any way. It needed to have a kind of otherness, and that does then present you with a problem. If the alien is affecting everything else, and everything else needs to have an otherness. And the closer you get to the alien, the more other things get. And then when you meet it, it needs to deliver on the promise of being very other. It's a problem. It's difficult. If the alien wants to eat you, it's easier. I mean, look, I'm not being disparaging about one of my favorite movies of all time, actually, is Alien, which is about an alien that wants to eat people. But at least you have something to go on, which is it's a killing machine. It's dangerous, it's fast. Yeah, it needs to have claws or teeth or something. If it wants to teach you about its galactic federation and improve your culture, then it's intelligent and smart and it's motivated. It's motivated by the same kind of things that motivate us. This thing is not motivated by any of the things that motivate us. It may not actually be motivated by anything. It might be like a spore or a mushroom or a cancer, or and have no real sentient qualities at all, just echoing qualities. Who knows,
Alex is obviously such a great mind. He has really deep intelligence and writes such interesting material. I think it's, it's both entertaining and profound. You can talk about it for hours after watching a film of his with your friends, but you also can just sit and enjoy. It's both entertaining and thought-provoking. And he's very, very kind to his crews, and so you see, that he's worked with the same people again and again, which is always really nice.
Morning. I've been working with some of those people for, I think, about nearly 20 years, or about 20 years. And there's an enormous amount of trust. All of these people, production designers, VFX supervisors, DOP, all of them, they all can act truly autonomously in a way I can completely relax about. They will surprise me by having made everything better and elevating everything, and it's a huge sense of reassurance, and it's also fun. It's nice. It's nice to see people you really care about on set and feel that you've all got your shoulders to the same wheel. To be honest, the only frustration about it ever, from my point of view, is that what typically happens on the films I've worked on with them, particularly the ones where I'm credited as director, is that I get credited for their work. Things that they do that I had really almost nothing to do with, or sometimes nothing to do with, just simply automatically gets attributed to me. That's something I find kind of embarrassing. But apart from that, everything about it is a pleasure.
One thing that Alex does do very well is he gives you room. He gives you room to bring to the table what you've imagined, what you've created, what you've wanted to bring to your character. And that is, to me, you seldom get those opportunities to be allowed time and space to bring yourself, to bring your imagination, to bring your craft. He's a very giving artist, a very giving director.
Very good, very, very good. Can we do one more with screaming, and then we're going to do one more without?
We need one more.
You've got at least two more. So.
Did you want me to be making this? I'm not making any
No,
noise.
I think it's absolutely perfect.
Okay,
The
good.
noise
I don't
is
think
not,
I would want to
it's
bring
not for you
attention.
screaming, it's actually just for the noise of you moving about.
Got it,
and that kind of stuff.
I mean, anytime you'll say to him, your movie, he goes, it's not mine. He feels very protective over the fact that film, and he's right, is a real collaborative effort.
I find that the dynamic of all the women is something Alex did very well. I really do feel like we were all handpicked because we all fall into each other so well. I found 4 new phenomenal friends, and I came here to make art, and I'm leaving with a beautiful piece of art and 4 new friendships.
It was great and rare to get to work with so many other women and so many great women.
to see women just taking control of their fate, taking control of their destiny. You know, I think that's going to be very useful to women out there that seldom get to see themselves in this position. And it's a awesome sci-fi thriller. I think everybody's going to want to see this movie.
I think it's going to work as a genre film, as a sort of populist genre film, but it's also, you know, it's really about something. It's smart. It's about the environment and about disease and about, you know, things that really are frightening to you.
What is he doing?
It's a very rich film. It's got a lot going on the entire time, and it's something that it definitely rewards repeated viewings, and you can engage with it at a very profound level if you want to.
It's got some terrifying things in it, and then it has a lot of very languid things in it, so you really don't know when the surprises are going to happen. And you don't really know where you're going. You just know you're on this journey, and it's, you know, potentially quite terrifying.
It plays with some quite deep ideas about what does it mean to be human, and what does humanity mean, what does it mean to change our humanness into something else, and does changing something else then enable something to become human? There's a lot of interesting ideas there as well.
I like working in science fiction because science fiction gives you permissions in terms of the kinds of ideas you can put in there and the kinds of imaginative leaps you can make. And it's fluid. It's forgiving and it's fluid, and it gives you permissions.
A lot of the great sci-fi is, it kind of ropes you in with this familiar idea of what the film might be, or this genre, and then within that he explores very deep, and in this film I'd say painful things.
Okay. I know why you went in.
Visually and also in terms of mood is just such its own strange beast, sort of, that hopefully it'll give us a feeling for what that thing is. You know, why do we do things to hurt ourselves when we're supposed to be just surviving?
I'm only trying to understand what drove you.
I owed him. So I went in.
At that themic heart of Annihilation, it's a film about self-destruction. And self-destruction could include psychological self-destruction, you know, self-destruction via behavior, human behavior. But it could also include cancer, because cancer is one's own body attacking itself effectively. So anything that fitted into self-destruction worked themically. And so this film tried to look in a holistic way at self-destruction.